Hey everyone, welcome to a new video. Today's video is going to be part 2 of my eyeshadow palette collection. I already filmed my Makeup Revolution eyeshadow palette collection, which I will link in the eye above. And today we're talking about one of my other favorite brands when it comes to eyeshadow palettes, and that would be Urban Decay. Urban Decay, I think, is my OG go-to eyeshadow palette brand, and I still very much have a sweet spot for them. If there is one brand that I collect makeup from, especially their palettes, then it would be Urban Decay. I know some people go for the Too Faced or the Anastasia ones, but I'm an Urban Decay junkie at heart, and I thought I would do a dedicated video, especially because I don't want to make my full eyeshadow palette collection too long when I get around to doing it, and this will allow me to go a little bit more in depth on each palette, tell you a little bit about why something is my favorite, or why I like something, how often I use things, and that's, I think, a really great way of going through all of these palettes. There's quite a bit here, so let's just get to it. So the very first eyeshadow palette that I bought from Urban Decay is not the Naked. No, that's not it. I actually bought this as my very first, this may have been my very first high-end eyeshadow palette. I'm not entirely sure. Maybe it was the Too Faced one. I'm not entirely sure anymore, but this, which I believe was called the Deluxe Shadow Box, if I'm not mistaken, was one of my first eyeshadow palettes, and I remember buying this online or something. This is what it looks like. These shades are really, really nice. This is getting a little bit old, but it has some OG eyeshadows from Urban Decay. Of course, we're dropping things. There's some OG shades in here. Fishnet is really nice. Ransom is a great one as well. Graffiti is pretty much the main reason why I keep this palette around, because it's such a great green. And these still feel very soft and really, really nice. Going from oldest to newest, because I just got my hands on the Backtalk palette. This took ages for it to come our way. That sometimes happens with Urban Decay. We finally do get the brand here, which is great, but we are very behind on the releases. It has a pull-out mirror right here, and then you have these shades here. You get 8 eyeshadows and 4 face products. Now, I have to be very honest, the minute I saw this, I knew I wasn't going to be using these as face products. I use these on my eyes, and it just makes this palette a lot more versatile, because that way you have more transition shades, you have some more highlighty shades, which I know a lot of people didn't like because they felt these were a little too chunky, but this is a great inner corner highlight as well. So I knew the minute I saw this, I was going to use these on my eyes and not on my face, because these aren't really my shades when it comes to my complexion. So, but I thought that pulling in these shades to create eyeshadow looks would be great. It's an eyeshadow palette that makes a very monochromatic look, so that's something you have to like. I personally really like it, especially if it's like mauvey, plummy, pinky, purpley shades, and it has a couple of warm tones, so you can also pull this a little bit more warm toned if you'd like. Which I think is why a lot of people didn't like it. They felt it was too warm toned, and they didn't like the packaging. Now, I'm someone who doesn't bend their palettes backwards at all. I like to keep my makeup as pristine as possible, actually. I'm a bit of a nerd like that, so I have had no issue putting this together again, but you definitely have to make sure that you put the eyeshadow, that you put the mirror in the correct way, else it won't stay shut. Let's, of course, go into the family of Naked palettes. I have all of them apart from the Petite Heat. If that's, I think that's part of their Naked line as well, even though it has a different name, but it goes with the Naked Heat palette. The first one to come out, of course, was the Naked one, and this palette is one that, as you can see, even though it's one of the oldest palettes in my collection, I haven't used a lot, because warm tones, especially warm tone browns, aren't necessarily my favorite. In the summertime, I do like to use this to go in with these bronzes and these browns here. I know that everybody raves about these shades at the bottom, but they just don't do it for me. I really like Smog and Dark Horse, so these two right here, those two are my favorites. I don't really understand the grays that they put in here at the end. I hardly get any use out of these but this palette isn't necessarily one I reach for a whole lot, which is why it looks so gently used. Now the palette that did see me use it quite a bit was the Naked 2 palette, and this looks like that. This definitely, as you can see, has gotten a lot more love than the Naked 1. Decay, which is this shade right here, has a really big dent in it, as does Chopper, which I don't think you can very well see here on camera. I really like Suspect as well, that has a dip in it, and I like Verve, Snakebite. For a very long time, these two shades, Suspect and Snakebite, were like my go-to palette, like my go-to look. Then of course, when it comes to like the larger Naked palettes, we got Naked 3, and this has to be my favorite. I've already put this in a favorite eyeshadow palette video. I've talked about this quite a bit. I've never really gotten around to reviewing it until fairly recently. Trick is the shade that has the biggest dent in it because I always use that shade when I go in here. Mugshot is my second favorite, but it's a more recent favorite, I'd have to say, because I've only recently been using that as like a one shadow look. And this is the very first Naked palette where I actually liked using the darkest shade as well. So this is one that I definitely still reach for fairly often because it's just my kind of shades. If I want to go for something neutral, something easy, then this palette is my go-to. I'm gonna go through the larger ones first. This is the Naked Smoky, which in the US has been discontinued, but you can still get it here. Smoky palette, I only really use these two shades here, which are Dagger and Slanted. I don't really use anything else in here because it's a little bit too dark for me. The purple and the black on here just look identical on my lids. And I do appreciate the fact that it has mattes and shimmers that kind of mimic each other, but I would need a shade that's in between these two to work as a transition on me. This is a little bit too deep for me, and this is too gray, so I feel that these shades don't all go together and work very well on my skin tone. But if I want to do a very smoky look, then these two grays are definitely my go-to for that. And this packaging that they started doing because of this, like since this palette, is absolutely stunning. And then last but not least, I think one of the most hyped up eyeshadow palettes by Urban Decay in recent years is the Naked Heat. It is very sort of samey. It's not the most versatile palette, but I really like this if I want to go for a super warm toned look. This palette, because it has a lot of red in it, kind of makes my eyes look more green than they actually are. You do get some good neutrals here. That could very much work as an everyday look. And yeah, I do really like, what's it again? Dirty Talk is a really nice shimmer, as well as Scorched, and I like Amber as well. Then I have these two baby palettes. We're sticking to Naked palettes for now. This is the Naked Basics. This was the first one to come out. And these were pretty much released because people were so annoyed about the fact that the Naked palettes didn't have enough mattes. So they started releasing these little palettes. This is also a great palette for traveling because you have all your basic needs in one palette. I do really like, what's it called, Naked 2 and Walk of Shame. These are some really nice, if you want to do something very basic, nothing too crazy, this is a nice palette. But I do have to say that I prefer the Naked 2, Naked Basics 2, because this again is a little bit more cool toned. These are more my shades, and this has also gotten a lot more love for me, as you can tell perhaps. These two shades in the middle, Frisk and Cover, are really nice. And if I want to do something very basic, like if I want to do a very glittery look, I have a couple of this Stila Glitter and Glows. I like going in with this palette first to sort of set up like the sculpting of my eye, and then I use one of those Glitter and Glows on like all over my lid, and then I have a great eyeshadow look. And then last but not least, a palette that I didn't think I was going to get when it first released was the Urban Decay Naked Basics Ultimate Basics, I have to say. And this is another all matte palette, and oops, let me turn it this way. This has a lot more colorful shades in there as well. So it has some warm tones, but it also has these mauvey pinky tones. So in a way, if you have this, and you also have the other two Naked Basics palettes, and you have the Naked Heat, I don't feel you also need the Petite Heat, because this already has an orange as well. So you get some warm browns that could work with the Naked Heat. You have these mauvey shades that could work very nicely with the Naked 3. So I feel that this kind of goes with the 3 other palettes that they didn't do anything with, so I don't really feel I need the Petite Heat because of that, because I already have this. The quality of this is very nice. It is a little bit expensive for how much product you get in here, I feel, but it does definitely give lots of versatile looks, and I really like those mauve shades especially. So you may be noticing that there are a couple of palettes missing from my collection. I, for instance, do not own the Electric palette. I never really like that very much because it had a lot of shades that looked very similar to me. The only shade in that palette that I really enjoyed was Fringe. Speaking of the shade Fringe from the Electric palette, however, they decided to put it into this. And when I spotted this online, I knew I had to hunt this down. This is the Afterdark palette, and this is a limited edition palette, so you can unfortunately no longer get this. And this was released spring last year, and I had to go through some trouble to get this because this wasn't released over here. So I definitely had to like ask a friend and say, hey, can I have this shipped to your place and then you can ship it to me? And she was very nice and she did that. So this is very sort of jewel toned, I'd say. This is a very jewel toned palette, and right here we have the shade Fringe, which is a very nice teal color. You get some neutrals at the top and then you get your colors at the bottom. So I was able to do a look with this row, a look with this row, but I also can mix and match these. It has Lounge, which is a shade that Urban Decay is also known for, which I didn't own yet. And it has just a couple of other shades that are really, really nice. Sticking to limited edition palettes, because that's the only things I still have. And now I have to be very careful that I do not blind you. Ooh, there we go. This is the 15th anniversary palette, and this is one that I bought back when we still had Sephora here, which is aeons ago, of course. This is not a palette I reach for a whole lot, mainly because the packaging is so bulky. It has a separate jewelry box, and apparently the lid comes off and then you can lift the palette out when you're done with the shadows, and then the whole palette is a jewelry box, which is a really cute idea, but I will never be able to go through these eyeshadows, so never mind that. But this has some really, really stunning eyeshadows, and I think these are all pretty like standard shades from the Urban Decay line. We have Deep End here, which I live for. Evidence is really nice. Omen as well. So these 3 shades to me are the like standout shades in the palette. I also really like Ace, which is like a darker version of Lounge almost. It is this like weird reflect to it, nice duochrome. Tainted is like a pink with a gold shift to it, which is really nice. Another limited edition palette is the Ellen's Through the Looking Glass palette. I didn't even realize that this was coming out until I spotted it in store when I was in London. In case you haven't seen this before, ooh, the palette is sliding out. It opens up and then you have some really artsy-fartsy design right here with a little butterfly, and then the palette slides out like that. A lot of people, well, this is the bulkiest and most unnecessary packaging ever, but it's very reminiscent of their old like shadow boxes that they used to do. They used to do those for Christmas a long, long time ago. I never actually got these until I got this. So this shade selection to me was super interesting. Each like column of colors is inspired by one of the characters in the Through the Looking Glass movie. So I think this is the Alice row, and this is the Mad Hatter, and I believe this is the Queen of Hearts, etc, etc. So if you look at it that way, as like 5 different quads that you can use, then you definitely have a nice interesting shade selection here, even though this last row is, or column I should say, is quite dark. However, I really fell for this shade here in the corner, which is Time, which is like a charcoal gray with like a blue silvery duochrome to it. And that's why I really wanted to have this palette. This has a couple of very interesting shades. Some of these 2 at the top, for instance, look like they are going to be boring brow bone highlights, but Looking Glass has like a pink shift to it, and a Lily right here is like a duochrome peachy gold. So these are really interesting. You get some really nice transition shades in here as well that can just really tie a look together. Is it a palette that needs a little bit more like time and effort? Yes, I think so, because this isn't your everyday shade selection, but I did really enjoy this, and I really enjoy the looks that I pull out of it. So I'm glad I got my hands on that. I think that we can again talk about some older limited editions. So for a while, Urban Decay did Vice palettes as their Christmas collection, and I have 4 of like the standard ones. However, Vice palettes, this was the first one, and this has very rubbery, like a very rubbery feel to it, which is why everything sticks to it and you can't clean it. It's like that NARS packaging, you know? So that's a bit of a shame. However, in these palettes, you did get a very lovely mirror. And then you have the shades here. I think this is actually my least used Vice palette because these shades, this shade selection was a bit and you get a couple of weird, very chunky ones. But you do get some like nice golds. Stash is one of my favorite golds ever. You get an interesting pink, you get a really nice purple. I really like the purples that they did in these Vice palettes. Those were always the standout shades. And I think, yeah, this shade right here is Armor, which is also in the Naked Smoky. Then we have the Vice 2 palette. This packaging was already a lot better because this is just hard plastic and it's really nice purple. Very Urban Decay, I'd say, because purple is their color, of course. And this is what the palette looks like. Now this got already a lot more love for me because this is a bit more jewel toned, which for a very long time was a lot more up my alley than the shades in the first Vice palette. This green is really nice, Damaged. Stash is a really nice like olive khaki. One of the best silvers ever done in makeup history is this shade Shell Shock. It has some really interesting pinks, and when I first bought this palette, I didn't think that those pinks were going to be up my street, but especially X-rated I found was a very nice sort of satiny finish shadow to put all over the lid. However, the Vice palette that took me the longest to get is the Vice 3. I initially decided to pass up on it because I hated the packaging. I don't like this at all. I think it's very tacky looking. So I decided not to get it. And then I remember seeing somebody doing a lot of looks with this, and I was like, oh, I need that in my life because these shades are gorgeous. So this is what the palette looks like. And this palette is the Vice palette with the most logical layout because you get 5 quads, like the Alice Through the Looking Glass palette. So you have a very matte neutral one, you have a smokier one, you've got your plums, you have this like burgundy or bronzy shade with a bit of purple, and then you've got your blues and greens right there. So you could use this palette like this and it would work. However, I like just bouncing around. Dragon is a really, really great green. Heroine is a really nice dark blue. I love this column right here is amazing. Sonic is one of the best shades Urban Decay has ever done, I think. Then the Vice 4. This was the last one they did before the limited or the 20th anniversary one. And this one, I think this is also where they kind of lost inspiration. I feel because these shades feel very similar to things that were already in the other palettes. However, Flame is a very nice sort of like orange with like a gold flash to it, gold shimmer. It also has Fastball, which is a very nice coral. Again, a very nice green, this grasshopper shade. But one of my favorite shades for some reason, and I'm not even sure why, is Arctic. And this is like a turquoise blue with lots of silver shimmer to it. Now I have 2 more palettes left. Both of them are Christmas releases that were released once the Vice palettes were like done. However, a year later, they released this. This is the Full Spectrum palette, and this was something I was definitely waiting for Urban Decay to release, and that is a rainbow palette. Now, a lot of people hated on this, and I get why they hate on it. Is this the best ever colorful rainbow palette on the market? Is it the most pigmented? Is it the best formula? No. But one thing I very much appreciate about Urban Decay Eyeshadow, why I'm such a fan, you could say, is that Urban Decay eyeshadows are super beginner friendly. This is a great palette if you've never used color on your eyes before and you're a little bit scared of using these kind of bright shades. I think that apart from this orange right here, all of these shades in here work really well, but you definitely need to layer them over a white base. And then last but not least, which was the last Christmas release that they did up to date, and this is the Heavy Metals palette. Now I had someone, I I had someone. I saw someone say that this palette, especially this part of the palette, is very similar to the Afterdark, but I feel that these are a lot more intense in terms of shimmer. So this palette, I'm trying not to blind you with the mirror in the middle. You have these duochromes. You have these jewel tones on one side, so you get some purples, you get a blue, you get a turquoise, you get these golds and silvers. These are very reminiscent of the ones in the Vice palette. And I'm going to move this to the other side. Yeah, I think this works. And then you have your neutrals on the other side, which are really stunning. This, in terms of shimmers, I think this is a palette that if you have this, you don't really need anything else in terms of shimmery eyeshadow. So filming in a heat wave is never a good idea. But oh well, we got through this video. I really hope you enjoy watching my Urban Decay eyeshadow palette collection. Please give it a thumbs up if you did, and subscribe because I make new videos every single week, namely on Thursday and on Sunday. So twice a week I'm bringing you new videos. And this month, every single video that goes up is an eyeshadow palette related video. So I'm definitely also going to be showing a like more elaborate eyeshadow palette collection as well, which will be coming up later in the month. So stay tuned and subscribe if you'd like to see all of that. And I really hope to see you in my next video, and I hope you have a great day. Bye!